This episode is brought to you by Stofers. Here comes 3-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling 4 things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
100 Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I am Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records, and I am your host as always. We have a new sponsor here at 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. It's the Metal Blade Museum and Store, located in Las Vegas, Nevada, right near the Strip. We have a ton of stuff in there from 43 years of Metal Blade. We've got Metallica stuff, we've got Slayer stuff, we've got Guar, we've got Lizzie Borden. We've got tons and tons of stuff in there. We've got vinyl that you can look at for old stuff. We've got a ton of artifacts. We also have a lot of metal bands, too, that Metal Blade has worked with, like Deep Purple and Alice Cooper and Stars and Guns N' Roses and Thin Lizzy. So there's a lot of great artifacts there. It really is the ultimate heavy metal museum. And recently, we also have moved our Metal Blade retail store into the museum. So that's in the first part. When you first walk in, the store is there. Free to get into the store. You got to pay to get into the museum. But for more information, go to metalblade.com/museums. I'm going to talk some UFO this episode. Great song, Love to Love. Going to have Mr. Martin Popoff talk to us in a couple of seconds about his thoughts on it. We're going to talk to Jay Ruston about the great production by the great Ron Nevison. And I got to bring in my old friend Eddie Trunk, because Eddie Trunk's favorite band of all time is UFO. So he's going to have a lot of good things to say. But we always begin it up north with Mr. Martin Popoff.
Excellent choice here for a UFO songs for these 100 songs that define heavy metal. UFO, Love to Love. So we're up to Lights Out, which is considered the most commercially successful, the most accomplished UFO album. I don't know if it's my favorite UFO album. I get in arguments all the time with people. I love the Tonka era. My favorites come from the Tonka era. But this is the band's 6th album, 4th of the Michael Schenker era. It's got the classic Hypnosis cover art. It's produced by Ron Nevison, who I don't think is always that great a producer, but I think this is one of the greater sounding UFO albums. It's warm, it's vibrant, it's got mid-range, it's got bottom end, it's got highs. It's just an exciting production that you get on this. Now, of course, the biggest song on here is the title track, Lights Out, but Love to Love is an absolute classic. Did I mention May 77? This is when this album comes out. In a way, I always considered UFO and Thin Lizzy sort of doppelgangers throughout their careers, and this is almost their album that is their jailbreak. It's like their biggest hit, although it did not go gold. But Love to Love is the closing track on this album, 7 minutes, 38 seconds long. I think this is their Sales of Charon, their Bohemian Rhapsody, their Stargazer, I would say. You know, we look at Rock Bottom that way as well. Not so much Lights Out, because it's more of just a straight heavy metal headbanger. But this is a very dramatic, interesting. It's maybe their Kashmir, I suppose, because it starts out, you've got this gong and then the keyboards come in. You get these interesting electric piano songs from Paul Raymond. It's credited to Phil Mogg, of course, on lyrics, but Paul Raymond and Michael Schenker get credit for the music on here, which makes a lot of sense because it is this interesting, dramatic mix of heavy rock and grand sort of pompous piano ballad kind of thing. So it's got this kind of Exorcist lick a little bit on the piano. It starts slowly and then those chords come creeping in and then you get that ascending, descending sort of thing going on. Definitely, it's more than a progressive rock masterpiece. It's more than a power ballad. It's like a progressive metal ballad. this is almost like a Rush song, because that whole opening thing, there's a lot of drop beats here and there, so the time signature's really, really weird. The verses don't start coming in until the 2:11 mark, and you get some orchestration in there. Ron Nevison always loved putting in orchestration, so you get that in this song, beautifully massaged in with the band ensemble stuff. And then we get the verses kicking off. We get a completely new music. It's in 3/4 waltz time, so we do get a smoothing out of the time, although it is 3/4. You get some B3 sort of sounds in there. You get that classic line, misty green and blue. I think there's a whole UFO fanzine named that, but that's a classic thing in there. More of the heavy stuff. And then, yeah, people absolutely love this song. And another reason they love this song is it's a highlight on the monumental Strangers in the Night live album as well. So it's important on there. And the reason they love this song is that on that album and on this album, it's got this amazing closing sequence that starts at about the 6-minute mark. So you've gone through these different types of music. There's not a lot of different kinds of music in there. It's just this, like I say, this innovative, interesting, progressive metal power ballad idea. But then you've got this, the clouds, the dark clouds come rolling in and the thunder crashing. And then you get this new, subtly different, but perfectly dovetailed in here, heavy passage. And then Michael soloing over it. And it's just this climactic close, just a really, it just underscores the gravitas of this song. The orchestration's in there as well, which is kind of cool. So Michael's doing battle with the orchestration. The whole band is going. It's loud. It's heavy. It's really cool. And then there's just this big sudden stop. So they don't wind this out. They don't fade it out. They don't do a big concert close up on it. It just comes to a stop. So it's just very purposeful, and it's an absolute UFO masterpiece. They're normally not this ambitious on songs, and I think that's what fans really love about this song. Is it feels, like I say, like a progressive metal masterpiece.
Thanks, Martin. Always great information. Thanks again.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Again, we welcome our old friend, producer extraordinaire, Mr. Jay Ruston. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. So we're talking about UFO. Amazing song, amazing album, Love to Love. But we kind of this is another one now where we're coming across these songs now where we have to talk about two productions, the studio version and the live version, because the live version is the one that most people know. And Eddie Trunk, who I'm interviewing, his favorite by far is the live version. So we'll talk about a bit of both of them. And this has come up a few times now. And, I'm old school. So to me, a lot of these songs I first heard as the studio versions, and that's what I like. But the live versions are good. And in the case of UFO, obviously that was the record that really kind of catapulted them. And there's a bit of a difference in this. I mean, it's the same song, but obviously the live version is a lot better produced. This was the second Michael Schenker album, the studio version. So I liked the way it sounded, but clearly it was, early on in the Schenker era. So I don't think they spent a whole lot of money on it.
Right. Well, I mean, they recorded at Air Studios, which I've been to in London, an amazing place. Although now it's moved into a church. So they were in the original Air, but yeah, the church room is insane. But yeah, I mean, Ron Nevison, he recorded most of Physical Graffiti and, millions of other records. He is probably the most underrated producer from the 70s and 80s and 90s to non people like me and yourself. Like, we know who he is. Steve Harris knows who he is. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has heard of Rick Rubin. Most people have heard of Mutt Lange. But to me, Ron Nevison is sort of an underdog hero from that era. And I think his records sound incredible, especially this album. I love the way it sounds. Schenker's guitar work obviously is incredible, but Nevison always got a great drum sound, almost like similar to Martin Birch in a way. Real punchy, deep snare, which is hard to do. Everything is smooth, yet it still sounds big and aggressive and doesn't hurt your ears like a lot of older records. A lot of the, Eddie Kramer stuff is thinner and brighter, and this has balls,
Well, he's Mr. UFO, obviously, pretty much produced all of the Schenker era stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I love the production too, because, you've got, the thing about UFO that a lot of people don't really talk about it as much as they should, is just how, obviously everybody knows about Schenker and how amazing he was, but the whole band, musically were amazing. Andy Park is a phenomenal drummer. Pete Way is a legendary bass player. You talk to Steve Harris, and it's probably one of his biggest influences. UFO, of course, being a huge influence because they play Dr. before every show.
You hear it when you hear Maiden songs too, like you hear the influence.
Yeah, but it's interesting listening to studio version again is the one that I came in on and just loved that. I love, I love these big epic songs, which, Love to Love clearly is.
Over 7 minutes.
Yeah, and the ending solo that Schenker does is just so mind-boggling, especially because the studio version, he was 17 or whatever when he was doing it, which is just insane that he could be that talented at that age. But yeah, it's just such an amazing song. It's one of those songs where just everything about it is really great.
Well, and of course, Nevison did the live version as well. So it sounds fantastic. And I was reading some quote how Schenker was upset that he didn't pick the best shows or the best takes or something, and Nevison was like, yeah, whatever, it sounds amazing and it made your career. So
right, exactly. Well, that's musicians, right? But that's the interesting thing about the live record too, is that this one back in the 70s when all these live records were coming out, and this came out late 70s obviously, they were a lot of them were studio and fixed. But this live record was pretty much live. I guess they recorded 3 or 4 shows and just Nevison. I think you're right. I think Nevison picked the tracks. I don't know the band had as much say on it, especially if Schenker was upset with whatever he picked. But yeah,
I think I read an interview with Nevison years ago because I was on a huge Nevison kick when he did the third Candlebox record, that Seattle band. Mm-hmm. I love that record. And it was so fat, and that was my first time discovering him because I went backwards and realized he'd produced records I'd been listening to since I was a kid in Detroit. And I'm like, oh, okay, he did that. And yeah, reading interviews with him, I remember him saying he basically, took all the tapes back to the studio, went through everything, and just mixed what he thought sounded the best.
Yeah. Well, clearly it worked because that was really the landmark record for UFO, especially in the States where, they went to the next level in the US, as many live albums did, with Kiss or Frampton or, Thin Lizzy, on and on, these live records that really made these bands big. But certainly for UFO, it took them to the next level. And it's, we talked about this when, I had Ron Capps on, Judas Priest, because he came in on the live version and looked the live version of Victim of Changes, and I like the live version, but I love the studio version. This one I can go either way. I think Schenker's playing is maybe a little bit, I don't want to say better, but more energy, I guess, because it's a live setting than the studio version. But either way, it's just incredible.
I guess because the studio version is like time stamped on my brain, it's hard to pick it apart, like his solo, at least anyway. And of course the live version, a lot of the songs from that record were played on Riff in Detroit. After 10 p.m. you just hear live UFO. It was just something they played, and I'm very fortunate that I grew up getting to hear that kind of stuff. But yeah, to me the studio version, the solos still give me chills, and as does the live version, but so I can't really compare them. I love his tone, and I would imagine he was probably pretty picky about how his guitar sounded, even at that young age, because his tone is so good. But, Nevison's a tone ninja, so it doesn't surprise me that it sounds as good as it does.
Yeah, and I was same thing. I was lucky. I've mentioned a lot on this show where when I grew up, there was an FM radio station in Los Angeles called K West that would play UFO and Judas Priest and Kiss and AC/DC and all these bands in 1970, 75 and 76, which was just that's why I first heard all these bands. So that's why I got into the studio versions of them, because I first heard "Force It" by UFO on the radio, probably Shoot or something, but. Went back and listened to all this stuff, and it's just so good. And it's interesting that Eddie, because we're going to talk to Eddie Trunk after this, if you don't already know, which you should have if you're paying attention to the beginning of the show. This is like, I think it might be his favorite song of all time. I mean, it's definitely his favorite. It's definitely his favorite UFO song.
Well, I know he's a UFO freak, and that'll be a very long conversation.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah. Just with Eddie, it's going to be a long conversation anyway, but it's good.
Yeah, it's but
yeah, he's always been a big UFO fan, which is why I figured if Eddie's going to come on for the first time, we got to talk UFO because that's his band. That's the band that he loves the most, and he clearly is an insane fan of it. But it's interesting for him, and he's a little bit younger. He's the same way. He kind of prefers the live version to the studio version, where I'm a little bit the other way.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, this is a little before my time, but I grew up basically learning the 70s from Detroit radio. So Zeppelin, The Who, The Guess Who, Sabbath, UFO, Ted Nugent, all that stuff was just drilled into my brain from listening to the radio, which will never happen now, sadly. Album AOR radio, it just was a different time. And
Sirius XM. Sirius XM.
Yeah, I suppose. I guess
we hear all this stuff now.
That's a good replacement. But did they go? I guess they would go deep on certain stations on there for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. For the metal version, it runs the gamuts from Ozzy's Boneyard to Liquid Metal to Octane to all that sort of stuff. But they play a lot of stuff, and we've just found as a label that a lot of people discover, or we see sales go up. Or listens go up, streams go up whenever they play stuff. So clearly, a lot of people are hearing these bands for the first time on any of those Sirius XM stations. So thank you, Sirius XM, for your support of.
And they pay the bands really well too. So that's nice.
They pay the labels and the bands very well. So we like that too. Again, I want to mention Ron Nevison again because you're really right. I never really thought about it because he was obviously famous producer from then and still famous now, but you're right where he kind of runs under the radar a little bit. Everybody talks about the big famous producers, Rick Rubin's and Martin Birch's and all these guys, but you don't hear a lot of people talk about Ron Nevison as much as they probably should.
It's always kind of been strange to me because if you look at his resume, it's absolutely incredible. Well into the 90s too. He didn't really stop working till probably the mid to late 90s. And even, in the 2000s, he made a record here and there. But, his quality of work never waned. And it's just always been strange to me that he wasn't more of a household name, at least among musicians. And it's really perplexing because why? Most musicians like me and you, we looked at the back of records. We knew Ted Templeman did Van Halen. We knew Mutt Lange did Def Leppard and AC/DC. It was like you could identify
Eddie Kramer with
the bands. Right. Yeah, and you mentioned Ron being UFO's guy. And maybe because UFO isn't as big as those bands, he didn't become as a household. But he did Heart, he did Led Zeppelin, but he really only did, I think, one Zeppelin record. So, and most people associate Glenn Johns, Eddie Kramer, and Andy Johns with Led Zeppelin. So.
Yeah, true. It's always interesting. Maybe, for whatever reason, I mean, Martin Birch was the same way. Like he didn't really, very rare interviews with him. There's not a lot of, press about him. So maybe he just was kind of another guy that was into the work. But it is interesting that you mentioned that where I kind of think like, yeah, that you're right. Like you don't really, when we all talk about great producers from the 70s and 80s and beyond that, Ron Nevison isn't a name that comes up a lot in the top producers from that time, which is fascinating because he clearly was up there in all of those.
Well, he should be, and we appreciate him, and maybe some listeners will now dig deep into his catalog. And I really suggest a lot of people listen to that third Candlebox record because it didn't really do anything because their first record was their big one. Mm-hmm. But the third one's really good, and it sounds amazing. It's just fat.
Well, you guys have homework now, thanks to Jay Ruston, so don't blame me. Thanks, as always, for doing this, man. Much appreciate you.
My pleasure. Every time I see Ron Nevison's name, I'm like, oh, yeah, cool.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
And we are back in beautiful Las Vegas at our friends The Space. Not only do they have this amazing podcast studio, there's a beautiful room right behind that door over there, which if you need a room for a concert, a party, an event, a wedding, many other things, please visit the space. And now we welcome in, let me see if I can get all this stuff right. It's going to take a while. You know him from his days as an executive at Megaforce Records when they were the hot thing. You know him from his many, many years on radio in New York. Many TV show appearances. He was, of course, the main man behind that incredible show, that metal show. You can hear him Monday through Friday on Sirius XM. The legendary Mr. Eddie Trunk. How are you, sir?
What an intro. Thank you very much. And what role reversal we have here, right? Usually it's the other way around. You're on my radio show. I'm interviewing you, but I know we're just having a great conversation here, so thank you.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with this show. I get to interview people that interview me, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But you're on the hot seat now.
All right,
so we're talking about the incredible UFO song, Love to Love. And I've always said that the 70s, I mean, I grew up in the 70s, so I'm partial to the 70s. And a lot of this podcast is talking about bands from the 70s because for me, that was the foundation of heavy metal. All these bands laid the foundation. All you have to do is look at UFO and see that Steve Harris was massively influenced by UFO, so much so that Dr. Doctor was played before every Iron Maiden show. So you mentioned that this particular song, which I love, because I love anything that's long, epic songs I love. And Love to Love is definitely a long, epic song. So you mentioned to me it's not only your favorite UFO song, it might be your favorite song of all time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a bold statement, I know. But look, there's so much UFO that I love. They're among my top 3 or 5 favorite bands ever. Probably, in my opinion, most underrated band ever.
Agreed.
On a lot of levels. And I love equally the Chapman stuff to the Schenker stuff, by the way. And I also love some stuff they did with Vinnie Moore much more recently. The original Schenker stuff in the 70s, early 80s stuff with Chapman, among my favorite music ever made, all of it. When I look at that body of incredible songs, because it's just one great song after another, to try to pick one, but the reason why I kind of default to Love is because it checks every box in the 6.5, 7 minutes that it is.
7:34, I believe.
Depends on live or studio.
That's true.
But it checks every box for what makes absolutely, in my opinion, like the most brilliant, perfect melodic hard rock. I make the case UFO may be the best melodic hard rock band of all time for me. And to me, Love to Love just sums that up in its running time. It has everything in that 7 and change.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you know, the thing about UFO too is, and a lot of these bands is, and then none of them want to be called heavy metal, and that was kind of a bad word unless you were Judas Priest or Black Sabbath in the 70s. But I argue so much because so much of this stuff, like we talked about Rock Bottom on here before, and that's a heavy song. Like Schenker's, those riffs are amazing. And he's my favorite guitar player of all time, is Michael Schenker. And this song in particular, there's a lot of really interesting parts about it. And I have to ask you this question, because I never really thought about this before because I'm old. So for me, these songs are always the studio versions that I like, because that's what I first heard with the studio versions, and then later the live versions, which are also amazing, of course. But I never really thought about it until I had Ron Capps, the legendary NHRA funny car guy, on, and we were talking about Judas Priest, Victim of Changes. Now, I go back to the studio version. That's the version I listen to all the time. But he came in later, and he got it on Unleashed in the East. So for him, the live version was the one that he got into. So which of the two versions do you like more, or is there an answer to that?
Oh, it's an easy answer, and it's the live version from Strangers in the Night. Strangers in the Night is among my favorite albums of all time across the board, let alone live albums. There you go. I mean, it's the most insanely great live album. It may be my favorite live album of all time, and certainly among favorite albums ever. Okay, so when you use that Priest example, I think the Unleashed in the East version of Victim of Changes is head and shoulders above the studio version.
Really?
Personally. Yeah.
That's what Ron said. I like the studio version better.
Yeah, no, I think it's head and shoulders. Although I know we're talking about
That's
UFO
okay,
here,
we'll ramble.
But there is that one moment in the studio version of Victim of Changes where Halford does that kind of growl. He goes, that's really cool. But on Strangers, but on Love to Love, there's something. Okay, so on the studio version on Lights Out, it has that effect, like, I don't know what it is, that, it's a cool build up into the song.
And there's a lot of acoustic on the studio version. I kind of forgot about that until I went back and listened to it the other day. I'm like, oh, that's right, I forgot about all that.
Yes, but there's that like shrieking, I don't know what some sort of keyboard thing, but goes into it, and then it goes into like you hear a gong hit, and it's just like a little keyboard thing. But on Strangers, it's just I don't know, you hear the audience in there and you hear the keyboard start to come in and just the build. It's just flawless. So yeah, the long answer is Strangers, the live version.
Interesting. Yeah, I like both a lot. I think
I do too,
I think the live version's a little more raw. And more together, because studio versions of things can be a little bit different when it's live, although as we all know, a lot of the 70s records were live, but I'm sure there was some overdubbing in there.
Not this one though.
This one they said was mostly live, and I think that's true because one thing about UFO, like if you go to Spotify, for example, or Apple Music, they've got to have 50 live shows that you could listen to now. And then they released all the shows that they recorded for that, however many there were, and they all sounded pretty much the same. So I go back and I think there's very little, if any, overdubbing on that. Which is amazing, because back in the 70s and 80s, that wasn't really the case.
100%. And I can confirm there isn't, because I talked to both Ron Nevison, who produced the record, and Mike Klink, who engineered the record.
Yep.
I was just with Klink in Canada a couple months ago. He did a Triumph tribute. We did a special in Canada with the guys in Triumph. It just came out. We went to dinner, and of course I just went right at him about UFO. He actually told me that at the time, that he was super heavily involved in Strangers because Nevison was kind of, leave it at being on another trip at the time. We'll say that. And he said that he was completely involved in that record. And he told me that, they basically found the best performances and they mixed it, and that was it. There's 2 songs on Strangers that were recorded live at a sound check or in a studio with applause added because they didn't do them live. They wanted them on the record. But outside of those 2 songs, the record's totally live, which makes it even more insane because it's so good.
Exactly, and that's what I was saying. It's so impressive that it's so good. But those guys were such amazing players. And again, Shaker, my all-time favorite guitar player. His guitar playing in this song is some otherworldly level. I don't even know how you can. I mean, it's most of his playing with UFO was that way, but this song in particular, that ending lead is just, it's spellbinding. It's so good.
Oh, the melody, and to the thing too about what makes the live version even crazier is I spent time with Andy Parker recently, the UFO's drummer, and he's like, it's amazing that record came out so good and it's so revered. He goes, because we were so coked up out of our minds. I don't know how we played in time. Because, it was 78, 79. They were out of their tree. But it's flawlessly brilliant. And yes, Michael is brilliant. I mean, with Michael, you've got everything. You've got the melody of the solo, and then he goes off a little bit. One of the reissues of Strangers in the Night, the version where they put it in the original sequence and added 2 songs, Steve Harris wrote the liner notes.
Yep.
And in it, he talks about it also being his favorite live album. And he also talks about Love to Love being, if not one of his favorite song of all time. And he says in the liner notes, he said, I've heard it 1,000 times, but every time when it starts, I get goosebumps.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about this song. And it's just everything. It's just got every element. It's got these beautiful melodic passages. Then it just punches you with those power chords. It's got the chug in there. It's got everything. Yep. It's literally got everything in the 7.5 minutes.
It's one of those I like to call perfect songs where just there's nothing bad about it. Like every piece of it works together, and it's so. And that's why this song and this band has been on at least twice, probably one more time on 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal, because Steve Harris, if it wasn't for UFO, would there be an Iron Maiden? So you look at that one.
Oh, Steve Harris took so much from Pete Way. I mean, just in the way he moved, the way he dressed back then. And he'll be the first to tell you that. And another thing on Love to Love is Schenker just put out that record with him re-recording UFO songs. And who's the guest vocalist on Love to Love? Axl Rose. I mean, there you go.
Yeah,
and there's a new version of Love to Love with Axl singing it. That's how revered this song is among people who are in the know. There's probably people listening to this right now that have no idea what the song is because it wasn't a hit song, but it's a classic for UFO. And if you know, you know. And I thought Axl did it. I'll be honest with you. I was worried when I heard Axl was going to sing. I was like, oh man, I hope this is sacred ground. But I thought he did a really good job on it. And what people may not also know, speaking of Mike Klink, who engineered Strangers and I believe Lights Out, because he was Nevison's engineer. The reason why Guns N' Roses picked Mike Klink to produce Appetite for Destruction is because of UFO and his work with on Strangers.
Nice.
So, I mean, Klink told me that, and the GNR guys told me that. That's how many sort of things tie in with this.
Yeah, that's why it's important to talk about these bands because, again, this is the foundation of heavy metal. And I argue in the 70s, this was I called it heavy metal when I was a kid. I know that a lot of these bands don't want to be put in that categories and all that stuff. I get it, but we're kind of all in that world now anyway. So that's why it's so important. This song in particular, I love epics. Like all my favorite songs are 7, 8, 9 minutes long. If you look at my top 10 list, it's almost all that. Like, Hallowed Be Thy Name and Roads to Madness by Queens, or on and on. Halo It Flies, Alice Cooper, all this stuff. And this one definitely being one of them, because I always love those big epic things where you kind of go on it's like a roller coaster ride, especially this song where it starts out with that, haunting keyboard, and then it's the build up, and then Phil's incredible vocals, and then you end with that insane solo that Schenker does. And it's like, same thing, I got goosebumps just talking about it now. It's just so great.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing that, when I think about this song, is Love to Love has probably been, since it was recorded in 77 for Lights Out, it's probably been in every UFO live show they've ever played, regardless of the lineup. Yep. I mean, it's the, if you know, and if you know the band, it is that super classic magical song. Again, it's odd we're talking about this in this way because it was not a hit. You don't hear it on classic rock radio or whatever, but you can say that for a lot of stuff, I'm sure, on this list.
Yeah, I try to make it more palpable to people, because if we get too many deep tracks in, they're just like, well, what is that? So I get that, but there's songs like this that have to be talked about because it's so great and so influential. Speaking of that, have you seen the Schenker thing that he's doing now, the UFO?
I've not seen it live, but the tour is in support of that record I just talked about with Axl singing Love to Love. Yeah,
I'm going to see him open for Armored Saints, opening for him at not my favorite venue, but the Canyon Club in LA. But I'm excited to see it just because I want to see Schenker play all these songs again.
Yeah, I might go, because he's on the East Coast right now, and I'm here in Vegas, so I may end up actually doing that. I may even go to that show. I got to catch one of them. Going back to what I was saying about Love to Love live, too, is it being in every show. The other thing that people who have ever seen UFO know in this song is in the lyric in the song, Misty Green and Blue. If you ever go see UFO do it, the colors of the lights always change when he says that. And when I saw UFO live for the first time, Schenker was not in the band. It was
wow.
Chapman was in the band. But they did Love to Love. They were on a co-headline with Cheap Trick. And I remember going, and even then, Love to Love, but the first time hearing it played live, and the color keys on the lights changed. When he says Misty Green, Blue, they changed green, blue. And as a kid, I thought, oh, that's so cool,
That's awesome. And this record, too, this was just like so many live records that came out in the 70s, 80s. This was the record that really made them a big band in the U.S. Because before they were, they had some radio hits and they did well, but this record came out and just exploded, just like all the live records did back then.
And to that point, you could make the case that a lot of people feel that the reason why UFO never really broke in a huge way is because this record comes out, is phenomenal, but Schenker had left.
I know.
So that's the thing. The eternal question is, if Schenker had not left. When Strangers in the Night came out, Schenker was out of the band. So here's this guy who's the best looking guy in the band, let's be honest, the younger guy, and he also is this now established incredible guitar hero. So now everybody's starting to get all in on UFO after 10, 15 years of existence, and now they go see him and he's not in the band. And I hate to say that because I loved Paul Chapman. I really did. I loved him. But I know friends that would go, and there was a period where you didn't know who was playing guitar. And if Chapman came out, they were visibly pissed because it was like, I'm here to see Michael Schenker.
Yeah, it's so weird how that stuff goes because you just never know. Just to give you a couple examples, when Paul Di'Anno left Iron Maiden, that was very controversial back at the time. I remember when I was, I was there. In fact, I interviewed Paul. They opened up for UFO at Long Beach Arena in 79, 80. Anyway, interviewed Paul Di'Anno for my fanzine, and Paul told us that he's leaving Iron Maiden. We're both like, what? Freaked out. He goes, yeah, I kind of want to do something else. And I was like, it's kind of hard for me to watch the show. It was their final ever U.S. show with Di'Anno. But they were opening for UFO, which is pretty amazing. And it was, Paul Chapman at the time, too. But when he left, it was pretty controversial. And then Bruce came in, and they didn't really miss a beat for a minute. There's a few other guys that happened to, for example, it's a little bit different, but the band Chicago with Terry Kath. Terry Kath is a phenomenal guitar player. A lot of people went to go see them because of him. And then he sadly accidentally killed himself and was gone. But they went on to have a big career afterwards too. So you never know. I think that you're right about what you said, but I still think that there was a chance. And, reading, Pete's book and all the books about it, it seemed like there was a lot of other, like they were getting more heavily into the drugs. And there was a lot of stuff happening with the record company and management-wise. So I think the main reason probably was Schenker, but I still think they had a chance. Because some of those records, I agree with you with Paul Chapman. The first time I saw them was with Paul, and he was great. They were great.
Yeah, they were. I mean, now I think about it, I mean, I probably got into UFO. It might have been like Wild, Willing, Innocent, something like that, because I was in high school. That's 80, 81, whatever. And I love No Place to Run, and I love Mechanics. I love Making Contact. I love all those records. And I remember with Strangers, it was in the cutout bins. Back in the day, for people not old enough to remember, record stores would clip the corner of albums that they weren't selling and they had overstock and sell them at a reduced amount. Yep. And I used to buy cutouts all the time because it was a way to discover new music cheaper and see if you liked the band. Yep. And Strangers, for whatever reason, for a while was overshipped, and it was in the cutout bins because I got it as a cutout initially, and I was like floored by the album. Couldn't believe it was like, because usually a lot of the stuff in there wasn't that good or whatever, but I was floored by it.
Yeah, I would have thought we would come in earlier.
No, because like my whole world was Kiss up until about 1979-ish.
Yep, same here, by the way.
So yeah, I got into Kiss in 76, and I was just, any other band was a threat. That wasn't Kiss.
Oh, okay.
That was,
wow.
That was my mentality as a 12 or a 13-year-old. I couldn't let anybody else in.
I've talked a lot about this on the show, but I was insanely lucky as a kid. When I was like, so I think it was 1975, when I was 14. We had a FM radio station, the early days of FM, and they played UFO, Judas Priest, Kiss. That's where I just heard all of these bands. And I think it was Force, it was the first UFO record I heard. So I was like, oh my God. And so I would go out and buy all the records, just hearing the stuff. Same thing, Dressed to Kill was the first, Priest was Victim of Changes, and all these bands. So I got lucky and got into it really early. But I was too young to go see Schenker. In fact, there was the show that our mutual friend Lizzie Borden went to. They still hate him to this day for it. It was UFO, Rush. I'm trying to remember who the third band was. Somebody else really great, playing Santa Monica Civic in LA, which is like a 2,500 seat theater. And that was with Schenker. And I was too young to go. My mom would let me go. I think it was 1977. And friggin' Lizzie went. It was clearly pretty amazing.
Obsession was a cutout too, because I remember going back and getting that. That might have been my first studio album after Strangers. But UFO Obsession, which is an amazing record,
phenomenal,
was also in those cutout bins. But it's interesting because you obviously grew up in the LA area, West Coast. I grew up
East Coast.
Jersey, East Coast. Very different. And back then, like now, radio is kind of the same everywhere because it's all owned by one or two companies. Back then, it was very regional. The pull these bands had, and UFO in the U.S. and on the East Coast, what I think, and I pretty much confirmed this, they were always way bigger, I think, on the West Coast. I think they did bigger venues. Because I've talked to friends. My friend Brent Woods told me, he's like, oh, I'd go see UFO on that tour, and they headlined Santa Monica Civic. I'm like, UFO, when they played on the East Coast, they were like on a double or triple bill at the Palladium or the Beacon Theater in New York. When I saw them, they were on first before Cheap Trick at Rutgers Athletic Center in New Jersey. So they were never, I don't ever remember even hearing of UFO as a pure headline on any of those tours.
I think part of that was because we were lucky in LA. We had K West, which is the first one, kind of a bootleg FM station. And then we got KMET after that. And KMET would play, Kiss and UFO and all of these bands. Because I do remember, aside from that Santa Monica Civic, but that was early on. Like I said, I think that was 77. But every time they came here after that, they would play Long Beach Arena or the Forum, like the big arenas. They also were on this really big music, it was called California World Music Festival. Everybody was on there. Aerosmith, Nugent, everybody. And UFO was on with Paul Chapman, and they crushed. I went to that whole thing. It was at the Coliseum in LA, and they crushed it. So I think that was another big thing for them, at least in LA, was having radio support and also just killing that huge, 70,000 people show. So,
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Back then, it was very regional. So if you had a station in the market that was playing it,
like Chicago, where they recorded the live record.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, Chicago's the stronghold for UFO. It still is. I mean, I saw UFO in the more recent years with Vinnie Moore, and they'd play around the country and play clubs, and sometimes there weren't a lot of people there, honestly. I was there. I loved it, but whoever was there. And then I'd go to Chicago, and it would be like 3 nights at the House of Blues, Whereas if they were playing New York or something, they were lucky if they did one.
Yeah.
So it's really Chicago, maybe because Strangers was recorded there, has been the stronghold for America, at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're always looked at, and again, they're one of those bands, I kind of put them in the Thin Lizzy category a little bit too, where they're so influential, but never really got the success that they really deserved. I mean, Thin Lizzy at least has a couple songs, Boys Are Back in Town, you'll hear, and you kind of know them, but for me, the body of the rest of their work is much better than that is. It's kind of the same with the UFO, because you're right, they never really had like a huge hit in America.
UFO doesn't even have that. I mean, Thin Lizzy has the one song that's played on classic rock radio every 2 hours with Boys Are Back in Town. And they'll semi with that with Jailbreak, the song. But outside of that, that's it for Lizzy. And of course, we all know that catalog's amazing as well. UFO doesn't even have that. UFO does not have a song in the catalog that you hear. I mean, I'd say probably Too Hot to Handle.
Yeah, Lights Out, maybe.
The song Lights Out, maybe Only You Can Rock Me.
Yeah.
Maybe Doctor Doctor. But nothing close to the level of something like Boys Are Back in Town. They just never got that break, that bona fide radio hit. They just never got one. But again, like Thin Lizzy, the catalog is unbelievable. It's just, people ask me all the time, because there's probably no band that I've ever been more vocal about telling people about. All the years we were doing that metal show, I always found a way to talk about UFO, and everybody, honestly, people bust my balls about talking about UFO so much. Oh yeah, just goofing on me. Just,
okay. Well,
yeah, not just,
Yeah, I can see Florentine and Jameson doing that.
Yeah, like, as a matter of fact, there's a documentary being done on me right now, and the director, who I'm not in on the interviews when the interviews are being done, and the director said to me the other day, I go, so what's been coming up? He goes, more than one person said to me, what's the deal with UFO and him? So, but when we were doing that metal show, I often would push UFO. We even did really super early on in the history of the show. They did this bit where they tried to get me to get a tattoo that was a UFO tattoo and like roped me into it. So there was all that stuff about UFO, and I'll always bring up UFO on my radio show to this day or whatever. And to this day, they are the number one band that when I meet people, they say to me, hey, thank you for turning me on to UFO.
Yep.
I would have never known if it wasn't for you. And I tell people all the time, who cares if it's 50 years later? The music's still there. Go enjoy it.
100%.
So every day I'm hearing that still from people. Not every day, but a lot. Calling in. I run into people. Hey, I always heard you screaming about this band. I finally said, I got to hear what the hell it is. And whenever anybody asks me where to start, I always tell them Strangers in the Night.
Yeah, that's the most popular record, so that's a good starting point. And I get the same thing. Like a lot of my younger friends, who weren't there in the 70s. Like another record that you and I both love that is really underground and didn't get as much publicity as it should have is Riot's Fire Down Under, which we've talked about on this show with the great Brian Koppelman, he actually texted me and said, if you ever do Fire Down Under, I want to be on it. And I knew he's a huge fan. I go, dude, you're already on my list. So.
And Koppelman, didn't he put a Riot reference or something when he was doing Billions?
Oh yeah,
or put a clip of the song or something?
There's stuff out. He's as much as a fan of I am of that band, he is over the top.
Yeah, I know.
I had some people over at my house, and I have an autographed copy of that record, and one of my friends goes, what's that? I go, you've never heard Riot? He goes, no. I said, oh my God, let me put this on. So I put on Fire Down Under, and within 5 minutes, like, oh my God, he went out and bought the vinyl the next day. But that happens a lot because there's these classics that people just missed out on. And UFO is another one where I'm like with you. I know how influential they are. And you talk to Metallica or Slayer or Guns N' Roses, name any massive metal band right now. They all are massive UFO fans, but they don't get the love that a lot of other bands do, and I could never really figure out why that was. I mean, I understand why, I understand the business of things and why things don't work, and clearly they had a lot of stuff against them. But going back to it, it's like this stuff is so good and so influential. It should be talked about more. Yeah, it really should, and I'm glad you're doing this for that reason. And again, at the end of the day, you do what you do, I do what I do, but we're all still just fans. I mean, at the end of the day, we're fans. And it makes me super happy when I run into people and they'll tell me, whether because I played it or talked about it or they saw me wearing the shirt or whatever, they're like, they say to me like, hey man, I wouldn't have known about this song or this band if it wasn't for you. And that's like, that's why I started doing this when I was a kid, just to share the stuff with other people. And you're right about Riot. And there's so many of these bands that I love that's like, whether it's Icon or Coney Hatch or whatever, it's endless that there's stuff in that category, right? But UFO
the thing that's so maddening about them is it felt like they were just right there.
Yeah, and they should have been.
And they should have been. They just were right there. They didn't, like Riot, Coney Hatch, Icon, bands I just mentioned, those are very obscure bands. Yeah. Like, they never really got a sniff. But UFO was right there. It's like, should have happened.
But it's one of those things, I talk to people all the time, because they ask me, like, hey, how come, even on Metal Blade, how come this band didn't make it? Or how come that band didn't make it? It's the analogy I say is a car has four wheels. If all four wheels are going in the same direction, that car's going to go fast. If one's not going, it's not going to go anywhere. And in the music business, you don't have the right management, the right lawyer, the right label, the right booking agent. If all those four people are not on the same page, it's not going to happen. And that's pretty much what happened with UFO. They never had the right people. I mean, why is Metallica so huge? Are they great? Of course. Are they phenomenal musicians and write great songs? Of course. But they've been with Q Prime, probably the best management company of all of hard rock and metal forever. And they have the same thing, agents, like everybody around them is first class, and that helps them to maintain as big as they are. And that's, say the same thing about, pretty much any band that's huge. You've got to have that base around you. Just UFO, you're right, they got so close, but they just never had that whole thing working for them, which is a bummer.
And there's one other little fun fact about this particular song that I wanted to throw out to people. I think more people know Michael Schenker than know UFO. Yeah,
really?
Yeah, I do, because I feel like he's just became like more of a Guitar Hero guy, and Michael Schenker sniffed at a little commercial success after he left with On, and later on the more commercial stuff with Any Day or Any Time or whatever that song was with Robin McCauley. By the way, it makes me nuts when people are like, well, I only like the Michael Schenker UFO, because I feel like there's stuff beyond that and people should know it. But anyway,
agreed.
There's a song on the Michael Schenker album, Assault Attack, which is among my favorite of his solo records, called Desert Song, that is basically a rewrite of Love to Love, if you listen to it. The riff is identical to Love to Love. Listen to it. And I used to always think, I remember when I heard the song, when Assault Attack came out, and I'm like, holy shit, that's Love to Love. Now, Michael Schenker wrote Love to Love, co-wrote it with Phil Mogg, so he's only ripping himself off. He's entitled to do that. But I was like, to the point that I almost thought it was a nod to Love. And I asked Michael about it years later. And I said, Desert Song, Love to Love. And he goes, I write the music. Of course, I can do whatever I want, right? I go, so it is? He goes, yeah, of course. He goes, same riff. I go, I knew it. Listen to Desert Song on Michael Schenker Group Assault Attack. And the main riff in the song is exactly Love to Love.
By the way, even if you're not a fan of Michael Schenker yet, you should also listen to that record, because it's a great record too. But
yeah.
I have homework now, thanks.
Yeah, now that's a catalog, not going down that rabbit hole, but the Schenker solo catalog, to me, is wildly erratic. Right up until the newest stuff.
True.
If I'm being honest, there are some great moments, and there are some average moments, and there are some really like, what was he doing there moments. So the Schenker solo period, I look at the first album, second album, which was called MSG, Assault Attack, as the three best by far. Yeah. And that live album, One Night at Budokan, is really good too. That's real good too. Outside of that, Michael's very up and down, because to me, no one would ever argue that Michael's not a great guitar player, but I feel that for Michael to be great, he needs that
collaborator.
Yeah,
100%.
And with Phil Mogg, he had the greatest collaborator, lyricist, vocalist, everything, melody, everything that matched what he did.
Yep.
And when he was on his own, it was hit or miss who he had. Gary Barden was great with him, I think. The odd thing with Graham Bonnet is he didn't write anything. He just came in and sang that record, but that record's phenomenal. The one record he made. And then the McCauley stuff, he went more on a commercial thing. It was funny. I saw Robin McCauley sang for Michael Schenker last time I saw Michael, which was on Monsters of Rock cruise a year ago. And that's a very 80s-centric cruise. Mm-hmm. So people were like, oh, he's going to do all the McCauley Schenker stuff. Didn't do one song from that era, even though he had Robin McCauley singing.
That's weird.
Yeah, well, because he realizes now he was just chasing the 80s MTV stuff. Yeah. It wasn't really him. He even said that. I asked Robin about it. He said, yeah, Michael's not down with it.
Interesting. Yeah. Two quick UFO stories. So Michael Schenker played a massive role. I mean, most people know this, but I'll tell the story just because it's fun, in creating Metallica.
I didn't know this.
I'll tell you why. Because Michael Schenker played the country club in Reseda, California, which was our local place to go see shows. And everybody's at that show. Nobody knew each other at the time. Like all the Metallica guys, all the Armored Saint guys, all the Motley guys. I don't think anybody knew each other because it was in December of 1980. But that's the famous story where in the parking lot after the show, my friend John Cornarens ran into a kid wearing a European Saxon T-shirt. And nobody knew who Saxon was in 1980 in LA.
Oh, I know where you're going here.
So he ran up
Yeah.
and said, like, where did you get that shirt? He goes, you know who Saxon is? He said, yeah. Me and my friend Brian are huge fans. Like, oh, I moved here from Denmark, and that was Lars, and that's when John met Lars, and I met Lars a couple days later, and then you know the rest of the story. But that happened to Michael Schenker
that's so cool.
afterwards.
That's awesome.
So that's pretty amazing. Also, I think, I hate to bring this sort of stuff up, but I think also the amount of abuse that those guys were giving to themselves didn't really help them out either, because they were legends of all legends in terms of how messed up they were.
Sadly, some of the people on this recording that we're talking about have passed away. Paul Raymond is gone, and Pete Way is gone. But they'll be the first to tell you of their excesses and how crazy they were. That's why I made that comment earlier about the coke on Strangers. At that time. I mean, and I know these guys now, and I talk to them from time to time. And Andy lives in Texas. I just did 2 things with him. He played with a UFO tribute, and I hosted it, and we spent some time together. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, they'll joke about it now because they came out the other side. But
Pete Way, Pete Way's book is phenomenal, by the way, and he's very open about all this stuff too.
Yeah, and Pete was. Look, I always say Pete Way was the Keith Richards of bass.
Yep.
He really was, and he's my all-time favorite bass player. And total character. Had a chance to interview him a couple times, knew him a little bit. Super lovable guy, just the best, and unbelievable stage performer. And when you watch those old UFO videos, live videos, and you see Pete running around on that stage like a madman, it's put in the front of the bass guitar. Yep. I mean, again, you see a lot where Steve Harris, Nikki Sixx, a lot of people took stuff from Pete Way.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why it's important to talk about them, because all of these bands took things from UFO, and all of them look back on them as a massive influence. They said all you have to do is look at Iron Maiden and the influence they had. Like I said, they played Dr. Doctor for every Iron Maiden show. They have for 20 years now or something. So
it's literally their open music.
Exactly. And they crank it up, and the people get into it. I'm sure Steve does it this way too, that a lot of people go, oh, what is this? And I think they now know it's Dr. Doctor, and hopefully more people get into UFO.
And I told Rod Smallwood, I'm like, why don't you just have UFO open for Iron Maiden?
Yeah, right.
And they could play it live. He's like, blah, you, and I just broke.
Maybe if they do like a big party somewhere or something, they can do that.
Yeah, but I hope people that go to see Iron Maiden, I think some do, some don't, know that that's UFO, because it's the point now where, like, as soon as people hear it, everyone starts applauding and jumping up and down and singing Dr. Doctor. It's like, I hope people know. Like,
it's definitely a thing now. I noticed that too, because they crank it up, and
it's been going for over like 20 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's an important band, important song to talk about that. So thanks for doing it.
Mega important band, and yeah, people need to know about this kind of stuff, and it's good too, because I think it's we have this thing now where, as you well know, I mean, there's so much in the pipeline of music, and people can't decipher where to go and what to listen to. Everything's coming at them. You can click and hear a million things, short attention spans, whatever. So to have somebody like you or me or other people that have some sort of platforms like this to kind of give some direction, because I find that that's what people want more than anything, is like, okay, I've heard about this band UFO. Where do I start? And I would tell them I would start with Strangers in the Night.
Yep.
If you had to hone in on a song.
Agree, yep.
Start with Love to Love.
Yep, and that's the most fun about doing this. This has been my whole life, is just turning people on to music, whether it's the fanzine, working at the record store, and now the label. It's like, I just love to turn people on to music they might not have heard before. So that's the fun thing about doing the podcast. Because believe me, folks, I'm not making any money doing this, but it's a lot of fun, and if it helps the scene, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I started doing what I'm doing and been doing it for 42 years. It's just like, now I do 5 talk shows a week. Channel 103, Faction Talk, live 3 to 5 Eastern daily, please. Sirius XM. I can tell people about this stuff. I can do exactly what we just did. Yep. And if it inspires 3-4 people to go click and hear it, and then all of a sudden become a UFO fan or a Riot fan or an Icon fan or a Rough Cut fan or a Coney Hatch fan or a Malice fan or what do you name the band? Again, UFO further along on the food chain than those, but still, you get the point.
Gotcha. Well, you do a great job at all that. Keep it up. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks for having me, and thank you.
All right, that's going to do it. Fun episode. Big thanks to my buddy Eddie Trunk for coming on. Such a huge UFO fan. He always brings it when Eddie's on, when he talks about UFO. I love that. Thanks again to Jay Ruston, as always, Mr. Martin Popoff, Lizzie Borden for our theme song, and the man keeping the car on the highway, our producer, Mr. Christian Blatt. We'll see you guys next episode.
100